Good evening, everybody. Hello to everybody here in Zoom and to everybody watching on YouTube. We're broadcasting live tonight from Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, in the homeland of the Métis Nation. We're here tonight and in the future, for all those watching later on, to celebrate the launch of Broken Ribs and Popcorn, how the Winnipeg Jets became the best team in the NHL's most offensive era not to win the Stanley Cup, by Geoff Kirbyson. We've got a whole raft of fascinating guests here tonight, people much more interesting than me, so I won't take up much of your time. I just want to let you folks know, if you do have any questions at any point during the event, there is a Q&A box that's right at the bottom of the screen. So feel free to write in your questions there. You won't interrupt any of us, and we'll get to them as time permits. And then I'll be back at the end to go over some exciting details about book purchase procedure. But first, I wanted to introduce your host for the night. Greg Mackling is a lifelong fan of almost all things Winnipeg. At the top of the list are growing up with the Winnipeg Jets. Like the Jets, Greg has left Manitoba searching for greener pastures, only to return. As co-host of The Start morning show on CJOB, the new radio home of Winnipeg Jets hockey, he is honored to help share the stories of everyday Manitobans, feels fortunate to challenge our community's leaders, and is humbled to be a part of discussions like the one we are having tonight, reliving and celebrating our history and cherished memories. Please join me in giving a warm virtual welcome to Greg Mackling.
Thanks so much, John. An absolute honor to be here tonight, as you mentioned. Always terrific to be associated with any event that McNally Robinson is putting on. And we should probably introduce the principals tonight. Geoff Kirbyson, of course, is the author of Broken Ribs and Popcorn, and the whole idea that the Winnipeg Jets were the best team in the NHL's most offensive era to not win the Stanley Cup, unfortunately resonates all too well with me. Geoff, why'd you decide to write this book, number 2 in your series of books on the Jets?
Well, I wasn't planning on doing it, but I was talking to Greg Schilde at Great Plains Publishing after the hotline came out. He said, well, you know, you have to write a second one. And I said, what are you talking about? Like, the first one took forever. It took 4 years. And like Roy McGregor with the Globe and Mail, somehow he turns out a book every few months, but I don't know how he does it. But so we decided we needed to do another one. And what was the way into it? A sequel seemed to be on the NHL Jets. And it was Greg's idea to talk about them in terms of being so great, but just never being quite able to get over the hump.
Well, and I think that's probably our experience. So Geoff, will obviously count on you to bring some color and some behind the scenes knowledge and talk about the book. We should probably start by introducing the coach, Tom McVie, of course, the head coach of the Winnipeg Jets when they won the Avco Cup, the final Avco Cup in World Hockey Association history back in 1978-79. Coach, are you there? I think I might hear him. Well, while Coach is working out the technology, let's welcome longtime fan favorite of the Winnipeg Jets, Jim Kyte. Was a Jet for pretty much the entire 1980s, not all the way to the end. 1982-83, played a couple games with the Jets, and then with the Jets until 88-89, and then made his way around the National Hockey League. One of the true fan favorites in this community. Jim Kyte, great to see you again.
Great to be here, Greg.
And there's Coach Tom McVie. How are you, Coach?
I'm good. Thank you for having me up here. This is great. Terrific.
Well, it's always great to have you in Winnipeg, virtually or otherwise. And then we'll save, some would say the best for last to a great extent. Morris Lukowich, he was the enemy for years as a member of the Houston Aeros of the World Hockey Association. And then the Jets, well, they bought some of the players from the Houston Aeros. And it was, I think it was part of your job, Tom, to amalgamate the old Jets with the new Jets and get them working together. Morris Lukowich, a member of the Houston Aeros from 76-77 through 77-78, and then a Winnipeg Jet from 78-79, a member, of course, of that Avco Cup championship team right through until 1984-85. And whenever he touched the puck, you could hear Luke ringing through the Winnipeg Arena. Are you there, Luke?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
You sure can. Great to see you. And as Jim Kyte said, holy crow, you still got a full head of hair. It's like we're looking at those 7-Up commercials all over again.
That old 7-Up commercial. Yeah, that was a fun day doing that commercial.
Feeling
Well,
up.
Well, why don't we start with you, Luke? And we would be remiss if we didn't talk about Dale Hawerchuk tonight. So why don't we talk about number 10 before we really get into this and your memories, Morris, of Dale Hawerchuk coming into the organization as a rookie and the impact he had on the organization and your relationship with him.
Well, Dale was, we want to talk about the Jets being a really offensive team. Like he led the way. And really with the damage that the team went through coming into the NHL and losing so many players in the expansion draft, it was getting guys like Dave Babbage and Dale Hawerchuk that really started to turn the franchise back around to where to get it up to a successful level of excellence. And I mean, it was just amazing when he came in and like he did things that, you know, at such a young age that I hadn't seen before, that I hadn't seen a player do before. And he really had an incredible ability to tie a defenseman inside out and get by him and trick him. And then when he would do that, then his ability to fool the goaltender, it was just amazing. And he had such a good year. You know, he's rookie of the year his first year, and just, you know, it was really just amazing to watch him play.
He had an impact right from the get-go, and of course, making the playoffs, the fastest or the largest turnaround at the time of a team from the year previous to their success with Dale Hawerchuk and moving into that first playoff series against St. Louis. And although things didn't go the Jets' way in that series, ultimately there was a sign of things to come.
Well, it was. And, you know, actually just for a moment on that St. Louis series, that was a real tough break. We lost a game at home that really hurt us. And there was a call that was made in the corner where a St. Louis defenseman really took a run at Willie Lindstrom. And as Willie was falling down, it ended up that the referee turned and looked at that moment and actually ended up giving Willie a penalty. And that penalty St. Louis scored on, and it just really it took the steam out of us, and we ended up losing this game at home. And that really hurt us in that series, that one call. And it was something that actually happened behind the referee's back. He didn't see it. I think the referee was Ron Hogarth. And then he turned and he sort of saw Willie going down and ended up giving Willie the penalty. It was an atrocious call, but it really hurt us.
That was 38 years ago, and you just told that like it happened last week on the golf course. It's absolutely incredible, the memory that hockey players and athletes have for specific plays. Luke, we'll tap into that in just a sec. Coach, we wanted to bring you in here because I didn't know this. Jeff told me this today, that you told John Ferguson that you found the player that the Jets were going to draft in 1981. That, of course, ended up being Dale Hawerchuk. Tell us the story there, if you would.
I got to remember that, and I do. It's we all went down to Brandon. They were playing in the playoffs. They were playing in the Memorial Cup, and so we were in the hotel, and they had it all set up. All the amateur scouts there getting ready for the draft. Fergie running things like that, and I come in and sat down. And he said, "Tom, you don't have to be here. You didn't see any of the players. You're the coach." So anyway, I said, "Well, I'm going to go over to the rink. I'm going to go over with Brandon and go over to the rink." So Doug Carpenter was a friend of mine because I coached with him and against him and stuff like that. And so he called me down. He said, "Look at that young fella, you know. I saw him skating around and his sweater was shaking around. There didn't look to be too much of a body in there, you know, but he was just a young kid and came over and he said hello to me, and I didn't know really, I knew who I'd heard about him. And so anyway, I go back and I I go back and Dougie Carpenter told me about him and everything. And so I went back. So I went back and went down and sat down in the meeting again. And they got all these lists on the board. You know, there's no computers there, and they're all on the board and such. And so I said, why don't you tear all those things down? I just saw the guy you're going to draft. And he said, who the hell's that? And I said, Dale Hawerchuk. I said, what do you mean? What are you talking about? You've never seen him before. I said, I've seen him 10 minutes ago. I said, you're going to be drafting him because they took all our players for the championship, which was the best team I'd ever coached in my life. And we were through. We didn't have any players left, although we were able to keep Scott, and we also were able to keep Luke, you know, and that's out of the two guys we could keep. But that team was such a great team, and ended up, I wish I could have been there when Dale came, but we keep losing all the games. And I told people, I said, it's very tough to tell people that you can be a good coach when you can't even win one game. So I was out of there, and Dale came that next year.
Well, it was obviously one of the seasons that Jets fans will never forget. I'll never forget myself reading the Sports Illustrated when you guys finally beat the Rockies to break the losing streak or the winless streak, because there was a chance against Philadelphia, if I don't forget or don't remember incorrectly. I think it was a 6-6 tie against Philly, because they had a sort of a corresponding ridiculous 30-game undefeated streak that same season. Does that sound familiar to Tommy?
Yeah, it does. Anything in hockey is familiar, but what happened, we were playing, and we were playing against Washington also, and we were playing, and we were going good, and we were winning by, I think it ended up a high-scoring game, and we were winning by a game, and by 2 goals, and there was only a minute to go, you know, and they were going to pull their goaltender, and Scott, and so anyway, we had Babbage was on the ice, and I can't remember the other defenseman, and geez, the goalie came out of the net, and they came down and they scored the goal. And I didn't even change the thing, but there was only a few seconds left. I didn't change, and all of a sudden the puck came down, and they came into our end, and someone tipped the puck and went in the net. But it ended up in there was no overtime then. It was 8-8.
Right.
I went into the office. Down he comes, Fergie. It's a good thing that I grew up with him, and he was like my brother. I thought he was going to kill me. What are you doing? He said, what are you doing? What did you have those guys out on the ice? Not Babbage, but the other guy. And so anyway, it just got worse from there. It just went down, 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 you know.
Jim Kyte, you were a member of the Cornwall Royals, so you know a thing or two about Dale Hawerchuk's legacy in that community, on that team, and then, of course, you played with him for a long time here in Winnipeg. What are your favorite memories of number 10?
Well, Dale and Scott Arnia both played in Cornwall, and they were a year ahead of me. So Dale was actually 2 years ahead of me. So they won 2 Memorial Cups. And 5 of those players went on to graduate to the National Hockey League. So then I got drafted to the Cornwall Royals. So I only had training camp with Dale before he went off to Winnipeg. So I saw, how great he was before going to Winnipeg, and then he won the Calder Trophy and so forth. And then Scotty was with us for half a season, and then he got called up to Winnipeg. So Dale was first pick overall, and Scott was the first pick in the second round. So he would have been 22nd overall, and he would be a first rounder today, for that matter. So when I got drafted the following year, John Ferguson stepped up to the mic and said, the Winnipeg Jets picked from their number 1 farm team, the Cornwall Royals, Jim Kyte. I was 12th overall. So I had started the year with Winnipeg, and then I got sent back to junior. And at Christmas time, I had a bit of a contract stalemate with Fergie in the summer. So I don't know if you recall, but the Team Canada had their selection camp that summer in Winnipeg. And I told Fergie at the draft that if I don't have a contract before the Team Canada camp, I'm not going to go to camp. And he said, sure, no problem. And sure enough, the negotiations hadn't even started. And I get a telegram back in those days saying, "Don't worry, insurance is covered. Be on the plane tomorrow." And you know, I didn't go. And a big thing in the Winnipeg Free Press, who's Kyte think he is, and so forth. But I told Fergie, listen, I'm not going to be at the training camp if I don't have a contract. So that was, so I think it was 10 days later, I had a contract. So everything was good. But because I missed the Team Canada camp, I wasn't selected to the team. Dave King was the coach to the World Junior camp. And so I got called up to Winnipeg. The World Junior team went on to, I think they finished in 5th place. I think it's the only time they'd actually finished out of the medals in a really long time. So I get called up to Winnipeg and I show up at the airport and nobody's there to greet me. I don't know what to do. So I call the trainer back in Cornwall, Steve Oderkirk, and say, what's Dale's address? And because I know Dale and Scott live together, and I just jumped in a cab and I went over to his place. He opened the door and said, "Kyte, what are you doing here?" And I said, "I just got called up." And so he said, "Well, come on in." I got an extra bedroom, and I ended up staying for the Christmas break. And I went back to junior, and then I got called up later in the year, and I lived with Scotty and Dale then. So I got to know them pretty well. And one thing I do remember, and I said it a couple when Dale passed. One thing is it was 1982, and Hall & Oates had just come out with their album, and Man Eater was the #1 song. And Dale and Scotty played that album nonstop. And to this day, every time I hear Hall & Oates, but particularly Man Eater, I think of those guys, particularly Dale. So he really just from a personal side of things, it's Dale was salt of the earth, and didn't really. He let his actions speak for himself. Speaks for themselves on the ice, and he was an incredible talent, and just one of the good guys. And it's really, really sad that he's not with us anymore. But he certainly lived a good life, and something that we can all remember him by. And he was just a really good, as good as a person he was, as good of a hockey player he was, Hall of Fame hockey player. He's a Hall of Fame person as well. And those are things I remember.
Thanks for sharing that with us, Jim. Luke, why don't we step back to the miracle on ice game, as Tommy McVie calls it. And that was Tuxedo Night, the very first Tuxedo Night here in Winnipeg against the Montreal Canadiens. And you had the assignment to cover none other than Guy Lafleur. Talk about that. Was that your first game back in a while as well? Memory serves.
You know what? I'm not sure about that, but it was a night that we decided that, because I was a pretty fast player, that I would cover Guy Lafleur, but also if there was an opportunity then for me to go on the offense, I would. And I think I ended up, I think I was first star in the game. I think I ended up with 2 goals and 1 assist, and we won 6-1. And Lafleur didn't have a sniff through the whole game. And so it was an amazing night, because thousands of people showed up with tuxedos for that amazing night. And the thing is, I mean, Montreal, they possibly didn't get up for the game, but we sure did. Oh my gosh, we were so high as a kite, and like a gym kite. And anyways, we really played amazing that game, and we didn't really give them a chance, and dominated the game. But to kind of finish off the story so I covered Lafleur. I basically followed him around wherever he went, and whenever he got the puck, I would check it off him, and then I would go on the offensive. And so it really worked out very well. There was the next time we actually played against them was in Montreal, and that night I had the flu, and I was feeling terrible. And when I come to the opening face-off, it ends up that Larry Robinson comes and stands beside me, and I kind of look over and I'm wondering, what is he doing up here? Like, he's a defenseman. And it ends up that Larry follows me around the whole night. And every time the puck comes near me, he just creams me. And so Montreal, had a long memory, and so I paid a price for. Just want you to know that, Tom. So that, and that Robinson ever hit hard. So it was a tough.
He was a big man, and my mistake, Luke. You played 78 games in 79-80. So yeah, you wouldn't have missed any games. I remember you being on the hockey night. I lived in Brandon at the time, so wasn't at the game. And I remember you saying, "Anybody got a good set of blues for the game tonight?" as part of the introduction on Hockey Night in Canada. And I actually won a $5 bet off from my grandfather that night. So the only bet I ever won from him. So thank you for that. Tommy, why don't we talk a little bit about the 79 Avco Cup winning team? You mentioned it just in passing at the beginning, and everybody knows about the dispersal draft and the expansion draft and how Winnipeg got I'll be polite, taken advantage of when they came into the NHL. Just how good was that team, that conglomeration of the Houston Aeros and the Winnipeg Jets that won that final Avco Cup?
Well, it was the best team that I ever coached. Of course, that's not really saying much because I seem to be a quick fix kind of coach, and teams that were struggling, they'd send for me and I'd go in like I did to Washington, and they played 40 games and won one game. So they sent for me, and they knew they couldn't win a lot of games, but we'd get them working. And I think that they were fearful of losing that franchise. As Mr. Poland, there was no people around the building. So anyway, getting back to what we're talking about, I coached there in Washington, and talking about the Jets, I would say like Smitty in goal. He was really on his game then, and he was just terrific. And I talked to Don Lever, and I've talked to Jerry O'Flaherty, and they told me he shouldn't have been, when he played in Vancouver, that is, when he was in Vancouver, he shouldn't have been just the most valuable player on the Canucks. He should have been the most valuable player in the whole league, because he kept that team in there all year. And then the defenseman, Schoberg, came back, and our 6 defense were come back, and we had the toughness, and and we had toughness there. The 6 defensemen were great, and also the 4 lines were terrific. And it was just a tremendous hockey team, and they really got together. And I always tell anyone, and they were such a good hockey club, they even won in spite of me being their coach. So it was a fantastic team. And then when we win and we found out that they were going to take all the players away, it was really a difficult time for everybody, and especially me, because I just loved it there in Winnipeg, and I bought a home there, and my family was there, and the kids were playing hockey and everything. And I just could see, because I was in Washington, and I see what was going to happen in Winnipeg. And we went to the draft, and you had to take 4 players of each team. I think there was, what would there be, 17 teams in the league then, I guess, 21. Yeah, yep. 21, yeah, 17 teams. And so those teams had to lose. You had to get 4 players from each of those teams, 17 teams. And they hung guys out there, and I'm not going to criticize players or anything like that, but they hung guys out there that they didn't want, and they had contracts. So we had to, in fact, when it was all over, there was a team, I won't tell you which one it was, they had 4 guys that no one had even picked yet. And so anyway, we all got together, the other GMs and the coaches, and Fergie was there, and said, well, let's all take 1 player from that team, so one team don't end up with 3 of them or 4 of them, because it was that bad. And so I knew, by being in Washington, in fact, a couple of times I went up to Fergie's office, and I got talking to him, and I was thinking, my coaching life was low, really low. In Washington, although they worked hard and played, and we won 26 games. They hadn't won any games. So anyway, I almost was going to talk to Fergie about not coming back there, because I could see what was going to happen. And I loved Fergie, and he loved me, and I could see that this wasn't going to work, and the first year went by, and then we got into that next year, and it was just so tough on everybody around there, and tough on me. And I was living over at the Viscount, and I was wandering back and forth, and we were losing, and we couldn't win a game. And and Fergie came in after that game. We tied, I think, Hartford or something, and I just said, I don't know, Ferg, I can't. And I even stayed overnight in the rink. I didn't go back to the hotel, and he came in and we talked, and he never really fired me. I mean, he couldn't fire me because, we were just like blood brothers. And I just said, are you going to change coach? And he said, yeah. He said, and what he really was thinking was, or what he was saying was, I was really worried about you. He thought I was going to have a nervous breakdown, I guess. And my hair was falling out and such. And I loved Winnipeg so much, and I loved coaching there, and I loved the old building, and I would like to coach in the, and I did coach when we played in the old timers game, and it was just great at seeing all the people. And Winnipeg has a tremendous spot in my heart.
Geoff, you've obviously spoken to so many former players and individuals associated with the Jets over their history now, and researching these books and in your work. What Coach just said about Winnipeg, it's so common to hear how much, whether it's a snapshot in time, whether the players or the coaches or whoever might have been here for 6 months, 6 years, a decade, they all, to a person, seem to speak glowingly of their time here.
Yeah, that is a common thread among all the players. And that goes back to the 1972 team. And the original WHA Jets they would all tell me about how they led the league in sing-alongs, because Ab McDonald, who obviously was the captain and had won 4 Stanley Cups with Chicago and Montreal, he brought his guitar everywhere, and those teams hung out all the time. And then when they got into the NHL, the same thing. And I know that Jim and Luke will verify this. And I guess it is partly a function of, you're in Winnipeg, so no one's really more than 10 or 15 minutes away from anybody. It's not like you're in Toronto. And there weren't the distractions, I guess, of other big cities. And people like Randy Carlyle like to go ice fishing, so there'd be some outdoor activities like that. And Scott Arniel told me that he said after lots of games that they'd all go to one of the married guys' houses and order a bunch of pizzas, and the guys would sit around. Some of them would have a few cigars. There'd be kids running all over the place. And he said his time with Winnipeg, he still talks to former players. He knows their wives. He knows their kids' names. He knows where kind of what their kids are doing. And he didn't have that anywhere else. So for whatever reason, people can badmouth coming to Winnipeg because they don't like standing at Port Germain in the middle of January. But as far as the organization goes and the camaraderie of the players, it seems to be a pretty great place. I want to know if I can jump in with one quick question though. You were asking Tommy and Luke about Tuxedo Night, but Tommy, there was, before the game started and the Jets had such a great game and Lafleur got shut down. Wasn't Bobby Hull supposed to be playing in that game?
Yes, that was his comeback game. It was going to be a comeback. It was Bobby Hull night, as a matter of fact. And do you want me to tell you the whole story? Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we were playing Montreal. I think it had taken, you and I talked about this, it took the Vancouver Canucks about 10 years before they ever beat the Montreal Canadiens. And so we were playing, it was Tuxedo Night. And also it was sort of a Hall of Fame night because Mosienko and different players that had made it into the Hall of Fame. They were giving these guys trophies there. It was like I said, Tuxedo Night. The place had been sold out for about 4 months, and it was Bobby Hull's time back. And so anyway, the team was getting ready to go out onto the ice, and Bobby wasn't there. And there was all of a sudden there was a rule he had to be in the room early, but he wasn't there, and so the team was just about ready to go out in the overtime, and you could hear the people out there. And what happened is Bobby come running in as the team was just getting ready to go out on the ice, and I called him in my office and I said, I can't let you play. I said, I can't let you play. I said, I know. I said, but I said, all these young guys have dreamt about playing against the Montreal Canadiens all their lives. And I said, I can't go into the room as they're going out onto the ice and saying, you're not going to be playing tonight. And so I said, you can't play. I said, because, it would just ruin it for everybody. And he was okay. I mean, he didn't punch me or anything, but he was really disappointed. But he went out the side door. He went out an exit, and that was that. And as soon as the people were cheering and then everything, and I had a monitor in my thing, and the place went quiet because Bobby wasn't out there. And then down he comes. Fergie comes down and casually says to me, "Where's Hull?" I said, "Well, he came in late. We were just going out on the ice, and I had to tell him that he can't play because the team's going out there, and I can't." He said, "No, quit screwing around. Where is he?" I said, "I'm telling you, I told him he's not going to play." And he said, "Where is he?" And I said, "I don't know. He went out the back side door." He said, "Are you okay?" He says, "Do you know, I'm going to ask you something." He said, so now he winds up and he kicks my door in my office, and it's one of those hollow doors, and his foot goes right through the door, and he's hopping around trying to get his foot out. He said, "I'm going to ask you something." I said, "What's that?" He says, "Do you know that tonight is Bobby Hull night?" And I said, "Yeah, I know." He said, "It's going to be very difficult to have Bobby Hull night when Bobby Hull isn't here." I said, "I know, but he came in late. The team's going out, and I can't pull a guy right now." He said, No, wait a minute. "Do you know that it's tuxedo night? The place has been sold out for 4 months. Do you know that all the Hall of Fame players that have been born in Manitoba are getting their awards here?" And he said, what they've done, the TV, he says, the TV game usually goes in sections, as you know, that's your business, in the section. He says, but they froze it, and it's going right across from Newfoundland right to Victoria. They're gonna do the game from when Bobby Hull's coming back, and it's tuxedo night in Winnipeg. And now I'm getting a little, hot, and I said, he says, "Do you know?" He says, "These guys are going in the Hall of Fame. They've been in the Hall of Fame." And I said something stupid like, "I don't care if I'm going in the Hall of Fame." I said, "He can't play. He's gone, and he's not playing." He walked out. He came back, and he says, "I'm going to ask you one more thing." And he says, "And then I'm out of here. It's all up to you." He said, "What is it?" He said, "Do you know that Bobby Hull is one of the owners of this team?" I said, "No, I didn't know that." He said, "And where do you think you and I are going to be working tomorrow? We're out of here." And he left. And then after the game, when we beat the Montreal Canadiens, who just won the Stanley Cup, we outshot them 48-18. 48-18, we outshot them and beat them in 6-1 or 6-2 and outshot them 48-18. I must have thought on my way back to the hotel, someone up there must like me. I don't know. It was really an amazing story.
Well, it was an incredible night, to be sure. Hey, I don't know what you remember of this game, Geoff Kirbyson, but Jim Kyte, the fight against Gord Kluzak, the Boston Bruins. We watched that in our phys ed class on Monday. That was on a Saturday night, and I think we counted the punches. It was about 82 punches that you two exchanged at center ice, and I don't know if it was on national television or not, but lots of people saw it. Where does that rank with regards to your experiences? Was that your coming out party?
You're asking me, or you're asking Jeff? You're asking
that's
me.
For you. Oh, that's for you, Jim.
Okay, all right. Well, I guess my coming out party was really in training camp. We were playing Vancouver, and Vancouver had those ugly uniforms, and they didn't have names on the back of the jerseys in training camp. There's this guy who kept coming out to finish his check at the point, and I didn't know who he was. I remember Vancouver and Chicago were in the semifinals the year before, and they had a big bench clearing brawl. And there's this guy named Ron DeLorme who had Grant Mulvey strung out, and Mulvey had blood coming down his face, and I always remembered that they had this really tough guy named Ron DeLorme. So we're playing Vancouver, and I didn't really recognize the players or anything. This guy kept finishing his checks. I didn't like it. I cross-checked him back. He turned around and dropped his gloves. And it was my first fight in the NHL. I'm full of vim and vinegar, and I just went to town on him. And my helmet had come off, and I didn't hear the linesman. I didn't stop, and I got kicked out of the game. I got a game misconduct. So I go into the dressing room, and Dave Mann, we call him Scully, came up to me. He goes, "Do you know who that was? Do you know who that was?" And I said, "No, who was it?" He goes, "That was Ron DeLorme." And I said, "Oh my God, I could have just got killed." I didn't know who it was, right? So that was my coming out party. I cut him for 5 stitches over the eye, and it was right in front of the Vancouver bench. And I guess it kind of caught their attention. We played them the next night in Kenora, and I played, and DeLorme did as well, but the ice was so bad. Anyways, nothing happened. But the fight against Kluzak was the big coming out party across the league, in a sense that it was on Hockey Night in Canada. Don Whitman was calling the game, and I wasn't playing much. And Gordy Kluzak was the first pick overall in my draft. He was a big man, 6'5", 225 pounds, 220 pounds. I was 6'5", 210. He was a big man. And anyways, he set up in front of our net during the power play, a Boston power play, and he was clearing our defenseman out in front of our own net. And we had a big guy on our team, Wade Campbell. We called him Tree. And he cross-checked Wade. And I happened to yell from the bench, "Don't take that crap, Wade." And then Barry Long heard me, and he said, "Okay, Kyte, let's see what you can do." So I went out, and they said that we lost the draw. They set up, cross-checked him. He went down like a sack of potatoes. He got back up, and I hit him again. He went back down, and he lost his cool, which I was a bit surprised because he's on the power play. But he didn't like it, and dropped the gloves. And I've always been all offense, no defense, and we traded, 2 big guys going at it, and the referee, he said the 3 most feared words in the NHL, and when the referee says, "Let them go," just 2 big guys, just let them go, and they didn't jump in. And at the end of it, I was just happy to survive, and I had gotten the momentum had gone my way. I had lost my grip on him at one point. But anyways, I hit him a few times, and he was bleeding, and I left the ice with a big smile on my face just because I survived. And Don Whitman made the call, with an amazing call. And Fergie had that VHS tape, and every GM that came into the league, to visit, he would show the fight to them. He said, "You got to watch this fight. You got to watch this fight." Anyways, I ended up stealing the video from him. And my brother ended up stealing it from me, and he brought it to university, and he lost it. But in any event, it's one of those classic fights, and I was, it certainly sent a message across the league for sure.
Well, I don't know who has the videotape of the one that we watched or the copy that we watched, but I'm pretty sure my phys ed teacher would have been fired if that had happened in 2018, 2019, or 2020. Morris Lukowich, we got to get you back in here. And the rivalry between the Jets and the Oilers, of course, in the WHA, the Jets and the Arrows, and the Jets and the Whalers in the World Hockey Association. Just, we talked about how good that Jets team was, that final Avco Cup champion. Just how good were the Oilers, and maybe in particular Grant Fuhr, because for as good as the Jets were, the ability to, Coach mentioned the fact on Tuxedo Night, the Jets outshot the Canadians 48-18. There were lots of nights the Jets outshot the Oilers 50-20, 50-25, and Grant Fuhr was the difference in a 6-5 Oilers win, or maybe, he kept them in a Jet 6-5 win. Just talk about how good Grant Fuhr was in particular, Mo.
But there's two things I want to chat about first, though. One is I was on the ice for that fight.
I was wondering about that.
Actually on the ice, and so I had like an absolute best seat, like right, and I think there were way more than 80 punches thrown. I think, and we actually took that fight and slowed it down, and we counted the punches, and I forget what it came to, but it was like Gord Kluzak was a big man. And Gord, I think, went into this fight thinking like he had a misunderstanding. He misunderstood how tough Kyte was. And anyways, it was, in the end, it was a ragdoll situation. And I don't think Jim had a scratch on him, but Kluzak was bleeding. There was blood all over the place. So that's the one thing. The other thing I'd like to just mention is that, even though we had a team that didn't win for 30 games, that team worked incredibly hard that year. Like Tom practiced this so hard. The one thing is that I believe Tom felt that could be an advantage to us was to be in better shape than other teams. And at times Tom was unmerciful. Like we were a bunch of young guys, and we had some veteran players like Bill Lasuk and Lyle Moffat and Jude Drouin. Then we had a couple, like maybe Dougie Smale came in at that time, Dave Babbage. But we worked extremely hard. Like we did not deserve to go 30 games without a win. And it was an interesting thing. I asked, have I ever learned it? What did I learn from that situation? It was interesting. There's this thing that can happen, and I call it the here we go again. And that's a really dangerous thing for a team to get into, because it's very, very tough to get out of. Because we would start a game and the other team would get a goal and look around, and there'd be like 4 or 5 guys who could see that we're going, oh, here we go again. And we didn't have a team that could afford not to have everybody playing. So, but there's one thing I want to say about that team. We worked extremely hard. Even when we were in that losing streak, we worked hard. When we finally got out of it, we worked hard. It was one of the hardest years we ever put in. So, anyways, the Edmonton Oilers. Every once in a while we would catch them when they had been partying the whole night before, and we'd get the lead on them, and something that was pretty amazing. And we'd get the lead on them, and then they would slowly start to get the alcohol out of their system or whatever, and then it was incredible. Like a hockey game sort of has a frequency to it. And it almost has like a bit of a hum to it. Like there's all sound that goes with it. And the Oilers had an amazing ability to just turn up the frequency, like just turn up the speed, and then put it, and really at that time, pinching was just starting to come in as a strategy that could be used in the NHL. And they were an amazing team at pinching. And so there was at times where we would have a lead, and then we would spend quite a bit of the third period in our own end, or they would just be coming at us. And it was amazing how the game just went to another level. And it's like, it almost has a hum to it, and how the hum just went up, and the speed went up, and the pressure went up. And I thought those were some of the most exciting games I ever played in, was those ones against the Oilers where we'd get them down, and then they would turn on the pressure and the speed in order to get back in. It was extremely exciting.
It really highlights, Geoff, how good those Jets teams were, and it's right in the title of your book. And it wasn't just 84-85. It just wasn't 89-90. It was right from the last couple of seasons in the World Hockey Association right through until the early 1990s, where the Jets were measuring themselves against the Oilers and vice versa.
Totally. I think the thing that's too bad for Winnipeg, I think when they did the greatest teams of all time, the 84-85 Oilers, I think, were the team that was voted the greatest team. And I think that 84-85 Jets team, when you had 630 goal scorers, see if we can get this. So we had Howard-Chuck, McLean, Mullen, Boschman, Smale, and
McLean.
Steen.
McLean. Yeah, I think you only had. Yeah, you might have had 4 there. McLean, Howard, Chuck, Mullen, Boschman, Steen, and Smale. Correct.
Okay. And I don't think there had ever been a team with 6 30 goal scorers beforehand or since. And so, Kurt Keelback told me that as much as he thought the 90 team was a great team and should have knocked off the Oilers, he thinks the 84-85 team was the best team. And as much depth as there was on that team, you take out Howard-Chuck, it changed the dynamic. If you had taken out Gretzky on Edmonton, probably would have had the same impact. And so even though they were able to get by Calgary after, and you got to remember too, that going into the playoffs in 85, the Jets had won 13 games or had been undefeated for 13 games going in. And then they won the first 2 against Calgary. So they on a 15-game undefeated streak, which is unbelievable, especially when you put it in context of the 30-game winless streak. And so the Jets were the hottest team around. And one play when Calgary didn't get it deep enough and McCowan couldn't get off and Howard-Chuck came steaming back. And McCowan told me I had 2 choices. I could try, I was at a dead stop. I could try skating backwards. Howard-Chuck's going to blow by me. Or I can try and stop him and give him a bit of a cross check, which had happened 200 times that game. So to that point, no one had been injured on those previous 200 cross checks. None of them had been penalized. And Howard-Chuck had a habit of jumping around players sometimes. And he just happened to jump, lift his arm at the wrong time. And McCowan caught him. And I've watched that on YouTube a million times. And you can see it's instantaneous, the hit. And while Howard-Chuck is still in the air, you can see the grimace on his face. And I know the players who were at that game knew that Howard-Chuck didn't go down. And in fact, there's a great play from when Howard-Chuck played for Philadelphia. He got hit by Konstantinov. Vlad the Impaler got hit with his head down, got up, skated off. Got up, adjusted his helmet, skated off. Didn't stay down. So everybody knew when he was down, there was a good reason for it. And geez, it would have been fun to play Edmonton with that great team with Howard-Chuck leading the way, because that was Winnipeg's chance. And McCowan tells me that he will run into Winnipeggers in Calgary, or when he's in town. Sometimes he's in Winnipeg because his brother Geoff used to work here, and people come up to him and say, like, "Hi, how are you? You wrecked our chance in '85 by breaking Howard-Chuck's ribs," and then that's the end of the conversation.
Yeah, I've got a story there, but I won't tell it. It's not clean enough for the internet. Jim, Kyte, and Luke, I know that's that 84-85 team. That was a tough one for you because you got traded, I think, at the deadline or close to it, to Boston for Jim Nill. You were a big part of setting the table for that year. But Jim, how good was that 84-85 team? And maybe relive that Howard-Chuck moment real quick for us.
I was 20 years old and I played 71 games that year. It was really my first, got an opportunity to play a lot. And we had an amazing team. I remember one time going into Calgary and reading in the paper, and Lanny McDonald was being interviewed, and he said, we just won 10 games in a row. We look in the standings, we lost 2 points to the Jets. We fell back 2 points because they won 11 games in a row. And so that March was that late end of the season was an incredible run. And we had a great series against Calgary, and Ducky went down. I didn't see the actual hit. I just, watched the videos and so forth. But that was a big blow to the team. But we did have we tried to okay, this is what it is. Let's try to regroup. We still had 5 30-goal scorers. We had a really deep team. Let's see what we can do against the Oilers, and certainly would have been fantastic to have Dale. They had just come out with those quarterback rib cage flak jackets at that point. Dale tried to play with that, but when you got cracked ribs like that, it's really difficult to breathe. And he has more talent in his pinky than most people have in their whole bodies, but still, at that level of the playoffs, you need to be going full tilt, and we certainly missed him. And that's one of the teams I always thought that would be one team that could have won the Stanley Cup. Absolutely. If you got out of the Smythe division, you could win the Stanley Cup. With Calgary and Edmonton and ourselves, it was very, very difficult just to get out of the Smythe division in those playoff years. And if it was today with the conference standings, you'd be playing. You wouldn't be in that Smythe. The 4 teams that. If you won the division, you won the cup, except for Montreal in '86. All the winners came out of the Smythe division for the most part in the '80s.
But Jim, if Howard had been fitted with a flak jacket, it wasn't like there was any secret where he was injured.
Right.
How long would it have taken for Dave Semenko or whoever to come up and give Howard a 2-hander in the ribs, and then it's all over?
Yeah. Well, I don't think I can't recall whether, I know he tried to play with it. I don't know whether he actually played many games. He didn't, eh? No, I know he came out to practice once, but I know he did try, but at the end of the day, he couldn't be effective. So.
Morris Lukowich, going to ask you about Doug Smale's fastest goal in NHL history. I think it's 5 seconds, if memory serves me correctly. What role did you play on that? In that moment in NHL and Jets history?
You know what? It was a night that I forget who the coach was, but it ended up that it was Dave Christian was going to be the centerman. I was the left winger, and Dougie Smale was the right winger on this play. And it was we were playing against St. Louis, and right at the face-off dot, as we came out to face-off, I looked over and I saw an old teammate of mine, Brian Maxwell, who I had played with in Medicine Hat. And I knew Maxie, and actually he became a Winnipeg Jet eventually after that. But I knew Maxie that if the puck went to him, he would always turn and just pass it straight across to his defenseman. So it was like right before they were going to drop the puck, I called a huddle. And Doug came in and Dave was there. And I said, Dave, push the puck ahead. I'll come from the outside a little bit, and I know Maxie will just throw the puck right across the center of the ice. Smalesy, and actually Doug had, I think, the best acceleration of a player that I've ever seen, like off the line. Because when Tom McVie would have us doing the ups and backs, like Dougie was incredibly fast off the line to get going, and so it was right before it was literally. The play got formulated right at center ice right before it. And David Christian did a good job. He hammered the puck and it went straight forward right to Maxie. I could still remember. I jumped past my guy and came at Maxie a little bit from his left, and he turned, he threw it right across, and Doug just literally jumped right in and picked it off, walked in and drilled it. And it was very cool.
Jeff, you often talk about Kent Nielsen, the Magic Man, and what a great player he was. Mo, your take on Kent Nielsen, but also Willie Lindstrom, because I think Willie Lindstrom was one of the really underappreciated players, not only overall in the National Hockey League and the World Hockey Association, but maybe even here in Winnipeg. He was overshadowed by some pretty impressive hockey players during his time here.
Willie was he's one of the best skaters I've ever seen. Just an absolute beautiful skater, and had a fantastic wrist shot. And Willie used a very big curve. Like the curve was huge. Had it ever got measured, it'd be illegal for sure. But it was a real toe hook. And he would take that puck right at the very end, and he would drag it, and then he'd rip it. And I think he scored 5 goals against Philadelphia one night. maybe 6. And but Willie, like, he's just extremely talented. And he played his off wing, left-handed shot, playing right wing. And one thing also in that team turning around, the Jets team, and having, I think, a 46-point improvement from one year to the next. Willie was a big piece of that. Hamerchuk was, but then also was Thomas Steen. I believe that was Thomas Steen's first year also. And so we ended up we ended up having 2 pretty strong lines in that season, with Hamerchuk centering and then Thomas Steen centering the next line. Willie, just an absolute beautiful skater, and he and it was kind of, I was with him the day he got traded to the Edmonton Oilers. We were at a breakfast in Vancouver about 6 a.m. in the morning when Bill Sutherland came over and said, "Hey Willie, there's a phone call here for you." And Willie got up and he went over, and Fergie told him that he'd been traded to the Edmonton Oilers. I thought Willie was just about going to jump out of the airport. He was so happy. It was, he came back to the table and he was like just a smile from ear to ear. And then Willie, he won 2 Stanley Cups with the Oilers, and he was a big piece of that team in winning those 2 also.
He was a great player. I threw my radio across the room when I heard that he'd been traded for Laurie Boschman, but the Jets were looking for a center that could win faceoff. Tommy McVie, how about Kent Nielsen? Talk about the Magic Man.
I start out by saying, he's only around 20, 21 years old when he was here, and he would be at the rink. I got to tell you, like, I'd be in the rink all the time. Like, I'd be there in the morning until night and be there. And I'd go out and there'd be kids hockey, and all the kids would be playing hockey. And there'd be Kent Nielsen sitting in the stands watching, and not once, like all the time. And I say to him, you go home or everything? He said, "I just love watching the kids play hockey." And he'd be in the rink, not as much as me, but pretty near. And but anyway, we would do a lot of 2-on-1 drills. We would do a lot of stuff. Be great for the defensemen. It would be great for the forwards, great for the goaltenders. And sometimes I'd let it go because it was so good. And all of a sudden, they would go together. Peter Sullivan and Kent would go. And I'm telling you, it was embarrassing for the goalies because they'd be so loose and fooling around. And sometimes it would look like they would overskate the puck. And then he would just kick it like a soccer player over to him and shoot it in the open net, and the goaltenders would get mad and bang it. And I finally had to stop that drill in those games because they were driving the 2 goalies just crazy. It was almost like watching the Harlem Globetrotters play basketball. You should have been able to see it, because every time I see it, and the guys would be laughing and everything, and the defenseman would just stop trying because they'd pass it through and kick it to the other guy and then open it up, and Kent, the Magic Man. And one time they were doing that thing for him in Calgary, and he played, and I'd see him all the time, and he was good. And I was doing all this stuff, and they said, "Well, you can do that." And he said, "Could you hit the crossbar from center ice?" Probably. Took a slap shot and hit the crossbar. I don't know if he could do that again, but he was maybe the most talented. I think Wayne Gretzky said he's the most talented player I've ever seen. That's really saying something, but he was so good. When I think about it, it's just amazing that we couldn't have kept we did keep Luke. We could have kept any more of those players. Like, if we could have kept those guys, and we would have really been able to do job. But talking about Kent Nielsen, he was the most talented player. And I talked to guys that when he went to Calgary, and whenever he would get the puck and it looked like he was going to shoot, he would fool everyone, even the people in the building. He would fool it. And Don Lever and all these guys would go to the side of the net, and they would go, and the puck would come over every time. Every time it looked like he was going to shoot, the goalie would play the shot over there, and they'd tap it in. And they're all fighting each other, trying to get over there, because he was that good. He was brilliant. And you guys talking about Willie Lindstrom? You're one of the best hockey players that ever played for me, ever.
You just think about having Ruskowski, Preston, Lukowich, Campbell, and then you add Kent Nielsen into the mix, and that's without even Ulf Nielsen and Anders Hedberg. I mean, the team that the Jets might have had otherwise, it's difficult to think about without crying. Guys, we got to wrap this up here, but one of our good friends, been a longtime Jets fan. Obviously, there are rumors right now about Patrick Laine and his future with the Jets. There have been a number of players. I think the Jets have been, in this iteration of the team, pretty good at holding on to their players. But I'll start with you, Jim Kyte. If you were sitting with Patrick Laine, and maybe, we don't know, but part of the discussion is about whether he wants to be in Winnipeg or not. Let's pretend that's part of the discussion. What do you say to a young player like Patrick Laine about why he should commit to Winnipeg long term?
Well, I would talk to him about my experiences being a Jet and how I played for a number of other teams, and I never had the same family feeling that I did as when I played with the Jets. We'd have practice, and then we'd go across to Fingers and have lunch together as a team. And then we would go ice fishing or snowmobiling or something. There wasn't a lot to do in the winter. But after every game, we would go to a restaurant or somebody's house, everybody, the whole team, married guys, single guys, and we would have a meal. And then afterwards, we'd head down to Marble Club or the Palomino or wherever we were going. But it was what we were talking about earlier about how we knew all the wives, we knew all the kids, and I still keep in contact with many of them. And I never had that feeling anywhere else in all the teams that I went on to play with. Pittsburgh and Calgary and San Jose and in Ottawa. There wasn't that same sense of family. And that's what makes Winnipeg special in terms of the team, but also the community as well. But today it is a business, much more so. I guess it was a business when I played as well, but how many more? I'm looking at how many more millions of dollars do you want? But what you want is money doesn't buy you happiness, and you want to play for a team that A, you got a chance of winning the Stanley Cup, and B, that they're committed to winning, and you want to play in a great community that's going to appreciate you. I think Winnipeg, I think, has all three.
Morris Lukowich, same question.
Well, I believe Jim answered it really, really well. When I look at the Jets team right now, they are so close. Really, they had a tough loss against Vegas in the playoffs a couple of years ago. This COVID year was a little bit different, and they had a couple of terrible injuries. Yeah, you know what? I think that it's the idea of also building a legacy and leaving a legacy behind. Like, he really has a possibility of being one of the best Jets of all time, and respected in the entire town. So I'd love to see him stay and be a Winnipeg Jet. He's an amazing goal scorer when he gets on a roll. So, yeah, you know what? It's when he plays with Wheeler, boy, they are nice, and Scheifele. They are really a beautiful line. So, I'm unsure whether he would actually find that somewhere else. So I'd love to see him stay.
Coach, there's some conversation that perhaps it's about Patrick Laine wanting to play with certain players. Did you ever let players decide who was going to play with whom and what the line combinations would be, or was that something that had to happen organically?
Well, I talked to them sometime. I remember when I was coaching Jersey, we had, of course, Brendan Shanahan. We had Kurt Muller and Johnny McLean with the three young kids playing, but Kurt was playing left wing, and so they came in. They sent my boy Pat Conacher in to talk to me that they wanted to play as a line, and Kurt wanted to play a center, and he had been a center and a good one too, but he was playing left wing. So anyway, I said, okay, so I had them in, and this is the genius that I am. So I said, okay, I know you guys want to play together, and if you're going to, and said, Kurt, you're going to be the centerman. I said, Johnny McLean, you are the right winger, you're right winger. And I said, I know, Shanny, you are a right-hand shot, but if you want to play on that line, you're going to have to play left wing. He said, okay. He got 600 and some goals playing left wing, shooting that puck from the power play, and they were a good line. So sometimes it's really good to listen to your players, because they were really good together, and they all ended up tremendous players. But what I do want to talk about, I want to talk about Terry Ruskowski, and I want to talk about Billy Sutherland. Okay, so we're in the coach's office, and so Terry Ruskowski comes in our office. Not he never usually come in, and he come in. He said, you know, he says to Billy, he says, you know, he said, Coach Tom, he said, he's always yelling at Morris Lukowich. Luke, he says, he keeps yelling at Luke all the time. Every time he's on the, well, one of the reasons was he was one of our best players, and I thought if I could yell at Luke, I could yell at any of the players, because he was one of our best players and one of the best, scored 50, 60 goals. So anyway, but that's not the story. He says he keeps yelling at Luke all the time. And Billy Sutherland speaks up and says, he wouldn't yell at him if he didn't have it coming. And this is exactly what Terry said. No, you don't get it. I want him yelling at me just as much, he said. I want him yelling. I want him to yell when I yell at me. I want Terry. He said, I want the coach to yell at me when he yells at Luke all the time, because we play on the same line with the team. So now we're going to play the last game for the Avco Cup, which I'm wearing my ring today. And so anyway, he got really hurt his shoulder bad up in Edmonton, and we had a day. So anyway, I was around the rink, as you know, all the time. I was in there, going there, and old Bill Bozak was there with Terry Ruskowski. And his shoulder was so bad he could hardly lift it up. And he stayed there, and they stayed in the medical room, and I could see from my office, I could see them. They were there, and he would take him in the shower, and he would get that hot hose, and he'd hose his arm, and then he'd ice it and hose it. They stayed there all night, the night before that game. And it didn't look like he was going to play, but I knew he was going to play. And the people, I put him in the starting lineup, and then he was late coming out of the room purposely. He skated in the ring, and the arena just went crazy. And he come out. We win the game, I don't know, 7-3. It was 7-2, but it was a penalty. We dominated the game. It wasn't even that close, really. And what Terry Ruskowski did, he set up the first 4 goals. And it was about 4-1, 4-0. He set up the first. He came to the box, and I could see he was hurting. And he made 4 great plays, and Luke was in on it. Scored. He set up the first 4 goals and came in the box. I said, "You've had enough for tonight." And he was there, and I think he sat there the third period and didn't play third period. And he was a big reason why he came out that night and did what he did. I just love that guy. I love Luke too, but that's an amazing story to me.
Coach, thank you for your incredible memory, your incredible stories. Thanks for sharing them with us tonight. And anytime we get a chance to speak, it's an absolute honor. Thank you for this.
Well, really, this is sort of an honor for me, just being around you guys, right? It's great.
Love it. Thank you. Morris Lukowich, like I said off the top, you were an enemy for several years, but once you became a Winnipeg Jet, you became a fan favorite, a favorite of mine when I was a little kid. This is a real pleasure to share stories with you this evening. Thanks for this, and thanks for your time as a Jet. We appreciate you immensely.
Well, thank you. And you know what? My years in Winnipeg were the best years in my hockey career. It was so exciting to win the WHA championship, and then it was so exciting to be there when the NHL came to Winnipeg. So some just absolutely amazing years, and I just really hope the Jets win the Cup this year.
Right on. Thanks for this, Luke. Jim Kyte, never forgotten, man. You are one of the all-time fan favorites in this community. Thank you for this. Thanks for all you do in your community, for the greater community. You're an ambassador for so many things, and you're an ambassador for Winnipeg as well. That means a lot.
Thank you very much for having me. It's anything related to the Jets, I love to do it. My formative years were spent in Winnipeg. 7 wonderful seasons there. Met a lot of friends. I still have friends. It always has a special place in my heart, and it's a special community. So thanks for having me, and it was great to contribute to the book.
Geoff, congratulations on the book, #1 on the McNally Robinson nonfiction selling list. But you want to sell some more books? Not bad. Good for you, man.
If you're going to start out, might as well start out at the top of your category. That's fine.
You gotta love it.
But
I gotta show you this picture at the end here. You saw it before.
Look at that.
A little higher, Tommy.
Yeah, just back it off a little bit, please, Coach. There we go. There's Luke holding the Avco Cup. Just up a little higher if you can, Coach. A little more. There it is. Oh, what a sight. What a memory.
Not beautiful.
It is.
Tremendous.
Last word to you, Kirbyson.
But like these books are fun to write, and I'm happy that people are buying it. But it's a compilation of all the stories from guys like Tommy and Luke and Jim, and I talked to 125 guys, and the stories that they told. I'd like to think a lot of them haven't been told before, or at least not all compiled in one. And there are some unique stories in Winnipeg. We had Bill Riley, who was the 3rd black player to play in the NHL, and he had some crazy stories. I know he played for Tommy in Dayton, and we had Sarah Savard, of course, who Fergie had picked up when his retirement papers hadn't been filed, and Ray Neufeld, who came over in that Babbage trade, and he took abuse like crazy, and he hears about that trade. Guess how often he gets asked about that Babbage trade?
It might still be once a day.
Every day, 35 years later. So Ray Neufeld has the disposition to deal with that kind of thing, and he said if he was the Hartford Whalers GM, Emile Francis, he would have made that trade too.
Sure. So, every single time.
Yeah. So many players on the Jets, and I spoke with Dale at length. I guess it's about a couple years ago, and he told me some great stories. He was very open about how happy he was to come to Winnipeg. He met John Ferguson the night before the draft, and there was still some uncertainty. Was he going to trade the #1 pick? And Dale's dad thought Dale was going to go to Buffalo. Howard Chuck to Buffalo.
That'd never happen.
And Dale said to him, "Pick me." And he was very open about when he left to when he got traded, because he was a John Ferguson draft pick. He loved Fergie, like a lot of the guys did. When Fergie got fired, he went over to Fergie's house after the game, and wasn't a big fan of Mike Smith. Mike Smith said to him when he was a scout in the early 80s, he said if he had been the GM making the first pick, he would have picked Bobby Carpenter instead. And Bobby Carpenter was a good player, but he's no Dale Hawerchuk. And Hawerchuk was very open about. He said he told Barry Schenkrow, "I would go through a wall for John Ferguson. I'm not sure I could go through a wall for Mike Smith. I'll try it for a season. If I don't like it, you got to trade me." And at the end of that season, that's unfortunately it ended when the Jets lost that 3-1 lead against the Oilers, and that's when he went in and dropped the bombshell on Schenkrow, and unfortunately had to leave. And he thought he would retire Winnipeg Jet. His agent Gus Badali thought he'd retire Winnipeg Jet. So just so many players who were either here for 8 or 9 years, or were here for 14 games like Bill O'Reilly, everybody had great stories and they're all very open about telling them. And so I think it makes, you don't even need to be a hockey fan, I think, to like this, because it's, somebody said to me that it's kind of a story about Winnipeg told through hockey players. It could have been told through doctors or firefighters, whatever, but it's told through hockey players. And lots of guys have, as we've seen here, have great memories for a lot of these things. And it was fun for me to write. And it's been super fun for me to edit, because I had to go through and reread everything. And I would catch myself reading something for like the 100th time, and I'd go, hey, that's a pretty funny story. And so I'm still finding myself finding them. So I hope other people find them too. And some of the players with the hotline told me, they would say, oh yeah, I didn't even know that happened. So I hope that some of the players who are involved in this decade will read some things in there that they didn't know happened also.
One of my kids just came down thinking we were done, so I guess that's my sign to move on. Thanks to everyone who joined us tonight. Geoff, Jim, Coach, Luke, and of course, John at McNally Robinson. Thanks for facilitating this, and thanks for everyone who was a part of it. We'll bid you adieu, and we'll catch you again on the flip side, as the kids used to say anyway. Thanks, guys.
It's been fantastic. Just great. Just great.
See you, Tommy.
Yeah.
See you, Jimmy.
Yes,
Luke.
thank you all so very much. The book
See you, Jim.
is Broken Ribs and Popcorn. It's available at McNally Robinson Booksellers, in person, over the phone, or via the website. Feel free to come down and visit us. You can even have it delivered nationally, internationally, or within the city. It's been a huge pleasure and a privilege spending the evening with all you folks. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedules to be here with us and for sharing such incredible stories. And of course, everybody out there in Zoom and on YouTube. Thank you all, and have